Hi, this is Bill Heath. I'm the Superintendent of Schools in Lincoln County. I'd like to take the next few moments and talk to you a little bit about a new law that takes effect this year. It's being referred to as the third grade retention or third grade retention and remediation law. And it was passed in 2021, but it takes, because of COVID, the implementation has been put off until this year. So this year's third graders are impacted by this law. And I want to take a little time and go through a short presentation for you and try to explain at a very high level, a 10,000 foot level, what this law looks like and how it may impact your third grader. And for you parents who were able to come out to the school, your child's school, when I came around and met with all of the parents for the third grade. I appreciate you being able to be there, but as promised, for those who weren't able to make it, I would put out a short video to maybe explain the highlights of what was missed. So the third grade remediation, retention and remediation is what we call it. The actual full name of this law was the Tennessee Literacy Success Act and the Tennessee Learning Loss Remediation and Student Acceleration Act that the General Assembly passed. So the impact, though, is third grades. Now, just a little background on where this impacts your child. Third grade students, it's the first year that they take these high stakes end of course tests that we call the TCAP test. And the test that this law refers to is the third grade English Language Arts test. It's ELA. When your child takes this test, there's several parts to it. It's 3 or 4 subparts. Some of those are rather long tests. So I know that your children will be going through this for the first time as a third grader, but again, the General Assembly passes this law that we're going to use the third grade ELA to make some determinations about your child and what they will have to do in the summer or fourth grade if they don't score a certain level. So what are those levels? Well, the highest score possible or designation possible on the TCAP is exceed, and that's the highest scoring kids in the state. On track is the second highest score. Approaching is the third score, and below is the fourth possible score. Approaching and below there's asterisks there, and those asterisks are there for a reason, because if your child on the third grade ELA scores in one of those two categories, they will be caught by this law, and we'll have to begin looking at implementation and see how it impacts your child. So let me talk a few moments about the two categories. First of all, the approaching category. We do have several kids in our school system annually who will score in the approaching category. They're not quite on that on track category, but they're just below it. So on this third grade ELA test, if your third grader scores in the approaching category, they could be impacted by this law. What we would have to do is we would contact you and we would begin to look to see if there's any exemptions that your child may have, that we can pull them out of that bucket of students who are impacted by the law, if you would. So we would look, if your child is an English language learner and they've been with us for less than 2 years, they would be exempt. If your child has been retained in a year prior to the third grade, they would be exempt from this law, and this law would not impact them. If your child is a special needs child or has a disability or even a suspected disability of some kind that would impact your child's ability to read and score well on the ELA test, they would be exempt from this law. So we would take a look at all the kids that scored in the approaching category, take out those that are exempt, and then if the children that are left in there, the ones who scored approaching that are not exempt, would be offered an opportunity to retest. That retest will be scored by the state very quickly, and if they score at a higher level, the on track or exceeds, then they would then become exempt from this law. So let's say that all of that happens, they're not exempt, they retest, they're still not exempt. What does that mean to your child? If they're in this approaching category, it means one of two things. Your child will either have to attend our summer school that's required, for these children, or during the next school year, attend at least twice a week what we call high dosage, low ratio, high impact tutoring. The good thing about the tutoring is we already have that built into our schedules. We've been doing that for a couple of years now, so that would already be in place. Um, I know that these test scores are going to come back right at the end of the school year. It may impact summer vacation plans, so we want to let you know what we can let you know now, and then as quickly as we can once the children take these tests. Um, so if again, if your child's in the approaching category, they'll have to go to the summer program, and while there, 90% attendance and show academic growth, or agree to the tutoring the next school year. So that's for the children in the approaching category, the ones who almost made the cut but didn't quite make it. Now, for those children that are scoring in the below category, the very bottom category, uh, basically all the exemptions are the same. English language learner for less than 2 years, they're exempt. If they've been previously retained, they're exempt. If they have a suspected disability or a disability and are special education, and it could impact their ability to score on the English language arts assessment, they're exempt. However, and then at that point, if they're still not exempt, they will be allowed to take the retest. If they score well, they could be exempt. Okay, if they score well, they could be exempt. If they score one of those top two categories. But let's say your child's scores come back, they're in the below category. They're not exempt for any reason. They take the retest, they're still in the below category. Then this is what it means for your child. Two things. In order to be promoted to the fourth grade, they would have to attend our summer program and the high dosage tutoring in the fourth grade. They would have to do both. And by doing both, being in the summer program, attendance 90% minimum, and show growth, and attend the tutoring the next year, they would be promoted to the fourth grade. So the difference in the two, the approaching category, the word or was in there, either summer or tutoring in the fourth grade. For the kids in the below category, summer and tutoring in the fourth grade. We don't have a whole lot of students. It wouldn't be a large number of students that would be caught in the below category, but there are some, and we know, I want you to know we'll be working with you if your child is in this category, and trying to communicate things with you really well and helping your child get out of this category. So, timeline for communications. We have a brand new document here from the state I just want to share with you for a moment. Uh, First of all, where this timeline says universal screener, reading screeners, we administer those several times a year. We use those to get an idea of where your child is. So on here, it in the timeline, it talks about when we administer those, or when we should be administering those through the schools. In February, we'll be notifying you based on those results if it looks like your child has a potential of being retained because of not progressing in reading ability quick enough. The last assessment is near the end of the school year, the last benchmark assessment between April 10th and May 12th. Then they take sometime between April 17th and May 2, they'll be taking the TCAP, the test that counts in regard to this law. We'll get raw scores back on May 19th, which is our very last day of school. Those raw scores do not tell us who needs to be retained and who is impacted by this law. We won't have that data until the 26th, once the state turns those raw scores into what's called scale scores. So May 26th, a week after school is out, we should know what students are impacted by this law. Continuing with the timeline, the retake option will be from May the 30th to June 5th. Now that is right after a Memorial Day weekend. So I know some of you have vacation plans if your child is impacted by this, and they need to take the retake. They've got from May 30th to June 5th to do so. There is an appeal, which I may mention in a few moments. That window's open for 2 weeks up to June 13th. And then on June 7th, we'll get the retakes, the scores back. And at that point, other than the appeals that have gone to the state, other than those appeals, we will know who needs to be in summer programming or who has to come to summer programming or tutoring the next year. So our summer programming may start a little later this summer than in previous years because of this. We're not sure on that. We're still in the planning phases. But that's the timeline from the State Department. Now, getting back to this presentation, just going to recap a couple of things here. Students taking the third grade ELA, if they score in the below category or the approaching category, they are possibly going to be impacted by this law. These numbers here are the numbers of students last year in our school system that initially scored in these two categories. And that is a fairly high percentage, about I think it's about 57% overall are in one of these two categories. But a reminder, we had the highest test scores in all of South Central Tennessee. So many other school systems are dealing with much larger numbers. But anyway, students who score below will go through those exemptions. If they're not exempt, they will have to attend the summer camp, maintain 90% attendance and demonstrate growth, and go to the tutoring twice a week, 30 minutes each session the next school year. And a new caveat that I haven't mentioned is they must show growth in the fourth grade or they would be retained in the fourth grade. So they can go through these, through the camp, through the high dosage tutoring to avoid being retained in the third grade. But if they don't show growth in the fourth grade, they will be retained in the fourth grade. And that's as determined by the State Department of Education. Now, for those much larger number of students that scored in the approaching category, everything's the same except the word "or" is in there. They'll have to do the summer camp or the tutoring. Possible exemption criteria, I've already mentioned all of those. Then one last thing to mention, there are ways a parent can appeal the decision. That appeal would have to go to the Department of Education, and they will number one, consider whether or not to even hear the appeal. And if they do, they'll look possibly at the benchmark scores, the benchmark tests that I mentioned that happen periodically through the year. But of course, they would have to agree to hear the appeal first. And that takes me to the end of our presentation. Again, this is a new law. It's a third grade law. It impacts third graders this year. Next year, it will impact third and fourth graders in different ways. So if you weren't able to attend, I hope this has been some information for you. Please talk to your teacher if your child is a third grader and get their input. All the teachers were at these meetings. We've met with all the teachers and administrators to try to make sure that they are up to the rules here. So anyway, proceed with great confidence. Your children are in great schools in Lincoln County. We have great test scores. We'll be working with your children, and hopefully we won't have any children impacted by this when it comes time. Thank you, and God bless you.